Well, I want to welcome you all for joining us today, and I want to wish you a good morning or good afternoon wherever you're dialing in from. My name is Charlie Miles, and I'm a principal consultant with Pink Elephant. And on behalf of Pink Elephant and myself, I want to thank you for giving us about 30 minutes of your time today when you're busy. So we really are appreciative that you're here with us. So during that time, I'm going to talk with you today about something that I feel personally, and obviously we here at Pink have observed, something that's very critical in our industry, and that's around the ability to more effectively and efficiently manage our IT assets. So with that, before we get into the meat of the subject, I want to talk about why asset management is important. A lot of times when people think about asset management within their organization, I'm sorry, and by the way, before I get started, if you have any questions about the material that we're covering today, please go ahead and type it into chat. And at the end of the session, we'll have a few minutes to go through any questions that you might have. But again, we want to make sure that we truly understand or to think about why asset management is critical to our organization. And often when I work with clients or think about your own organization, when you think about IT assets, some of the things we primarily think about or are concerned with are the financial aspects of purchasing assets or leasing them. We think about software licenses and needing to control those or to audit those or to pay at the end of the year to true up our licenses. And all these things are important. But the other thing that I would like for you to consider is that all the technology-based services that we provide within our IT organizations today, the services through which we strive to provide our businesses and customers value, all of those technology-based services are obviously dependent upon IT assets, and not just dependent upon IT assets, but dependent upon the assets working and functioning properly. Now, it's paramount for the success of being successful in delivering and managing IT services and providing value to our customers and our businesses. It's paramount to doing this in a cost-effective and efficient manner that we have cost-effective and efficient ways in which to manage our IT assets and to control those IT assets. So it's more than just the traditional concern about the cost or purchasing of assets. Now, I've presented here some information for you to read through, to consider, that I pulled out of some recent surveys regarding the management of IT assets. And as you read through these, this really does reveal some rather disquieting facts in our industry. It points out that generally there's a lack of control around managing software licenses. There's a wasted budget, wasted funds, of which we have limited, for unused or because we have unused or underutilized software licenses, not to mention the potential compliance and security risks that are associated with this situation. Lack of support or commitment from our management for the improvements in asset management, even though if we're not managing our assets, that's the most basic fundamental piece of our technology-based services. But there's also a realization out there that the situation is only going to continue to get worse because of technology sprawl, right? Whether it be open source or whether it be cloud services, containers. The other thing that some organizations are really starting to come to the realization, the impact of the Internet of Things that might have on our organizations. But forget the information from these surveys for the time being, and just simply think about your own challenges and your own concerns with managing assets within your organization. A lot of organizations are at the risk of increasing the waste of financial resources stemming from not managing your assets. potentially the risk of increasing compliance and security concerns and the negative impact of those. And just the negative impact of the lack of controls over our IT assets, and what that will have, what the impact that will have on the delivery of our technology-based services. So this brings me to Pink Elephant's new IT Asset Management Essentials course. This course was created based on consulting that we've done with numerous clients over the past, helping them get a handle on their IT asset management as part of their overall service management program, to align IT asset management with the other frameworks that they use. Not limited to, but most notably focusing on the ITIL best practice framework. But I'm going to talk more about that towards the end of this discussion. The focus of this course is to provide an overview of basic and general concepts around the management of IT assets. But more critically, it provides guidance on how to use this information and make it useful knowledge to realistically manage and control IT assets as part of your overall service management program. For the benefit of providing more value to your organization through service management, but also at the same time to address the challenges that are unique to managing assets. Those challenges presented to us by compliance and audit, and of course the cost controls that we need to have in place. So stemming from our approach and our consulting practices, we've taken a hands-on or we use a hands-on case study as a critical part of the learning experience within this course. So it's not just sitting there and being lectured to about facts and information. This hands-on case study-based exercises provides some practical guidance on how to apply this information, but also on how to align and integrate or federate asset management with other critical frameworks focused or centering around configuration management from the ITIL framework. So this is the Integrated IT Asset Model, or ITAM, Integrated IT Asset Management Model, and the Essentials course is built around this model. Now, before I explain the elements of this model, let me discuss first how this model came about. So I don't know if any of you may be aware of, you might be. If not, there's some reference at the bottom of the screen for you to go and check this out. But the concept of the model, of our asset management model, was built around the concept of the golden circle, which was introduced by a gentleman of the name of Simon Sinek, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce his last name. But the concept is based on the fact that people are not sold so much on what you do or even how you do it, but rather people, when I say people, I'm talking about our business and our customers, are sold more on why we do something. So we base this ITAM, this integrated IT asset management model, on this golden circle. It's important to have effective practices supported by process activities and skilled professionals, and to have the proper enabling and supporting technologies and automation. But none of this is very effective or is even going to be supported by your organization if there's not a solid understanding and focus around why this needs to be done, about why this is important. So considering the golden circle of what, how, and why, we built this or developed this integrated IT asset management model. And the model starts with why. Why explains the purpose, the cause, and the belief of asset management. It focuses on the reason that IT asset management exists and why it's necessary. In order to be successful and provide true value and benefit, the IT asset management program must directly support the organization's strategy and vision. Therefore, the program itself has to be designed to align with the strategic objectives of the organization, and it must contain specific elements and tactics that fortify the organizational strategy and help achieve those objectives. Now, this premise of why we do asset management directly informs the entire structure of the IT asset management program. The program strategy shapes the foundation of the model, while the scope and the constraints of the program form the parameters of the model. And finally, this model looks at how best to apply the necessary practices of the program. Now, how do you do asset management? Well, how is what sets you apart from others. How is what makes your approach to asset management more effective. This is how you ensure the delivery of the benefits and value. So the foundation of the model establishes the strategic goals and the objectives of the IT asset management program in direct support of the organization's strategy and vision. In turn, this then drives how the model's practices are established and managed. Expectations are established via effective governance over the program, and the foundation also institutes effective measures to ensure the necessary strategic alignment between the business and IT, as well as the delivery of value and benefits and the identification and implementation of intentional improvements, continual but intentional improvements within the program. The parameters establish the proper scope of the program. This considers both the organizational and the functional scope for IT asset management and defines which assets will be in the program's scope of control. Now, one of the things I want to point out here when it comes to parameters and scope is that this is not just about IT. Because sure, IT may procure the assets and may build the assets and may deliver the assets and may distribute the assets and manage the assets, but the assets themselves are used on a daily basis by everybody within the organization outside of IT. So the scope has to consider the roles and responsibilities and the expectations of the entire organization, not just managing the assets within IT. So that's a critical part of the parameters within this approach. Now, the parameters also establish the critical interdependent relationships that asset management has with other service management practices in the organization, including configuration management and the other ITIL practices, as well as with security, enterprise security, procurement, purchasing, and vendor relationship management, also program and project management, as well as legal and compliance. So asset management, IT asset management, is not just an IT concern. It's an enterprise-wide, organization-wide concern. That has to be considered within the parameters, the overall scope. And that scope is going to inform how each practice of asset management is adopted and adapted and applied. Now, that brings us to the what of this model. The what represents the practices and the activities that are needed to deliver and manage IT assets. IT asset management practices are informed and strengthened by both the foundation and the parameters, and the practices provide the direction and the guidance on how to appropriately manage IT assets and achieve then the necessary program outcomes through which we provide value and deliver on the goals and objectives of the organization. And the IT asset management practices, as you can see here, consist of 4 general areas: asset acquisition, documentation, lifecycle management of the assets, and of course then disposal of the assets. Now, these assets are not sequential in nature. but because each are informed by and inform the other activities or practices, and they work together dynamically as critical links in the IT asset management service value chain. So now let's spend a few minutes just to take a little bit of a deeper dive into each of the activities. Starting with acquisition management, and again, this is no implied order that you do this. This is just, how we're going to present these practices. So the purpose of asset acquisition is to ensure that all IT assets are brought into the organization and that they're done so in a consistent and compliant manner to control and reduce related cost and security and compliance issues, and that all the IT assets that are introduced into the organization are known to the organization. So this focuses on the inception of assets within the enterprise and ensures that only those assets that are needed by the organization have been authorized or actually introduced to the organization. This comprises the initial stage of the lifecycle management of the asset, and it begins with the justification and the request for an asset and includes the purchasing, the receipt, the initial handling of the assets. It helps ensure that we understand what existing assets we have that could be recovered and reused or reallocated prior to or instead of having to acquire and purchase new or additional assets. It also ensures that all the assets being introduced to the enterprise are known, they can be managed, they can be secured, that we have asset standards that are established and encouraged but are actually used, and that there is always a valid business reason why we have purchased or acquired the assets to begin with. So what is the business justification for our assets? Now, this practice supports effective security and risk management that's associated with the management of these assets and serves to reduce the overall cost associated with the assets. But at the same time, this practice ensures that the assets that are needed to enable value through technology-based services are available in a timely fashion and are available when they are needed. So the purpose of the IT asset lifecycle management practice is to ensure that all IT assets are managed throughout the lifecycle in such a way throughout their lifecycle in such a way that supports the usage and the service requirements of those assets, the compliance requirements, and aids in the control of associated risks and costs. So this practice actually begins with asset acquisition and extends to managing the asset throughout the entire useful life of the asset within the enterprise. It covers the storage and the inventory, the deployment and the release, and the use and support of the asset throughout its existence. And again, I said use, so it covers how people outside of IT use these assets. This practice tracks the asset's movements and the changes and the upgrades and support, as well as inventory control and validation. This also includes the recovery and the potential reuse of assets, leading eventually to the asset's final disposition. The value of asset lifecycle management comes from fully understanding the total cost of ownership of the assets and informs better decisions for future acquisitions. Further, this practice ensures that all assets are recovered and are made available for reuse or repurpose when they can be reused or repurposed. And this action can further, or the action of reuse and repurposing assets can further reduce the cost associated from over-purchasing assets that are not really needed and help then determine the end of its useful life. As a result, this then triggers the asset's final disposition at just the right time, not too early so that you don't fully realize its total value, but not so late that you incur unnecessary support costs by keeping the asset longer than you need to. The purpose of the IT asset documentation practice is to ensure that all asset-related documents are identified and are effectively and securely managed and controlled. Asset documentation is critical, yet it's often overlooked within asset management because documentation ensures an accurate historical representation or record of the asset beginning with acquisition and continues throughout the entire useful life of the asset up to and including the final disposition, but also provides information beyond the useful life of that asset. Documentation reveals the true source of information about the asset, which is really critical to an enterprise on a number of levels, whether it be security, audit, risk control, upgrades, disposal. Documentation about the assets should be managed as critical assets in and of themselves. So asset documentation practice helps ensure compliance and to protect against the costs and the risks related to noncompliance. Documentation is necessary for several reasons, including satisfying audits, proving upgrade rights, supporting the rightful acquisition and divestiture of assets during mergers and acquisitions, proving due diligence and the lifecycle management and support of the assets, demonstrating proper use of the assets, and proving the proper disposal of the assets as well. Which then brings us to the fourth of the asset management practices within this model. And the purpose of this practice, the disposal practice, is to ensure that all IT assets are retired and disposed of properly and securely at the end of useful life. This focuses on the final and proper handling of all assets at the end of their life, regardless of the type of asset. There are specific actions that are needed to harvest the software, remove executables, recover licenses, wipe data, degauss and destroy the hard drive, and to ensure that the final disposal of the asset is done in a manner that protects the security and the compliance concerns of the organization. But this practice also deals with how to manage assets that are lost or stolen or otherwise cannot be accounted for. The value of effective disposal management lies within the control of costs related to overpayments for unused assets that should be removed. It enhances the security of company data and the avoidance of non-compliance fees associated with the final disposition. Now finally, this course recognizes that while IT asset management may be considered a framework of best practices that are separate from other critical service management frameworks, it doesn't mean that they can't or shouldn't work together. So not only is the integrated IT asset management model integrated in a strategic, tactical, and operational manner through the how, what, and why, but it also needs to be integrated with these other frameworks. But and not just these, but others that may not be listed here. But most critically, I want to talk about ITIL. Within each of the four practices that I presented within this course, there is an alignment with the practices and the activities within each of those practices with the ITIL practices and processes. Many of the activities required for the effective management of IT assets are performed by ITIL processes, whether it be request fulfillment or change management or incident or problem or release and deployment or any number of the other practices within ITIL. But in this course, we also address the critical need to integrate asset management specifically with ITIL's configuration management. Now, while establishing an effective IT asset management program can be challenging, it's often further challenged by the need to integrate with or at least work in concert with configuration management. Now, the difficulty here is that these two practices generally are developed and implemented in isolation from one another, and there's often a misunderstanding of their respective scopes of control. Now, as a result, there tends to be either duplicated efforts or a complete disconnect of efforts between the two. So it's important to have a good understanding of how these two practices have to work together in an integrated and coordinated manner. Yet, it's also important to recognize that they're not the same. Even though they both share and use much of the same data and are very interdependent, They each have different and specific uses and management and control objectives. So these need to be balanced, or these two disciplines need to be balanced, and this can be a difficult challenge. So that's the focus of this course as well. So now I want to take a few minutes just to discuss briefly the benefits of this course to your organization. While the course provides an overview of some of the basic asset management concepts, the primary focus is what matters the most: a realistic guidance for a practical application of managing assets in your organization that helps control the costs, reduce the risks, and improve your compliance standing. Now, this course is a 3-day long course, but ultimately it saves you time and training dollars by covering the management and control aspects of all IT asset types, rather than spreading this out over multiple courses that focus on just specific asset types, because there's a lot of overlap there. There's a lot of commonality there. But this course also considers that the world of technology and IT assets is constantly changing. And we need to recognize this and include this as part of our IT asset management concerns, above and beyond the traditional assets or software and hardware assets, right? Mobile assets, cloud-based assets, and of course the Internet of Things. So who can benefit from this course, or what audience is this course targeted to? Well, certainly any IT asset management professional could get something out of this course, but it's especially focused on IT asset management professionals who are new to the IT asset management world. However, IT and non-IT managers alike who are responsible for the implementation and success of an IT asset management program within their organization would benefit from this as well, regardless of their current level of knowledge or expertise in managing IT assets. Anyone in IT who is not familiar with asset management and who might even consider that they don't have any role to play in asset management, right? That's the asset management group's concern, not mine. But these IT personnel have some direct responsibility for handling IT assets, whether that be procuring or receiving or installing or maintaining or fixing these IT assets. That's a critical role that they play, and it affects and it involves asset management, and they need to understand that role, and they need to understand their responsibilities. So this would be a good course for any IT person who doesn't really understand IT asset management. But procurement and purchasing professionals, both within and outside of IT, who have the responsibility for the acquisition of IT assets, and really any IT management level personnel who want to know or needs to know how better to manage services through effective management of IT assets. So throughout this webinar, I spoke to some degree about the objectives of the course, and this slide and the next slide outline those objectives for you. But in a nutshell, there are a lot of people in the IT industry who know very well how to manage IT assets. The objectives of this course are really focused on how to manage them effectively for the purpose of providing value to your organization. And as a result of more effective management of your assets, this helps reduce the total cost of ownership of your assets, while at the same time increasing the return on the investment in them. And this includes reduced costs and the negative impact of legal and compliance concerns throughout the entire life cycle of your assets and at the final disposition of your assets and beyond. So if you're interested in this course, we have a public online instructor-led course already scheduled for October 28th. It runs from the 28th through the 30th, and I think that's a Monday through Thursday. And we also run these public online courses about once a quarter, but we can also do this for you within your organization as well. So if you want to get more information about the course, this course and other courses, just go to our website, www.pinkelephant.com. and go to the training and certification links to find out more information about this course and others. But before I leave you, just one final thing, and before we address any questions that may have come up, asset management is just one of many topics and areas of concerns and interest in the industry today. So I invite you and your colleagues to our annual Service Management Conference in Vegas at the Bellagio this coming February. I'll be speaking there as well as some of my PINC colleagues and many other industry experts. And there'll be sessions about asset management, the Internet of Things, ITIL, and really focusing on ITIL 4 since that's new to the industry, service management in general, organizational change management, IT leadership, lean, agile, DevOps, and many other topics. So you can check this program out on our website by clicking on this splash page to get more information about the program and the sessions. And I hope to see you there. But with that, that brings us to the end of the webinar. Thank you. And it looks like we have some questions here. Let's see, maybe there's, let's see, what are the differences between ITAM and CMDB in terms of the information contained within them as well as their structures? That's a very good question, and that's one of the critical topics that we spend almost a full day of the course talking about, because my experience has been that's where the true challenge lies. And so in a real brief nutshell, IT assets and configurations might be one and the same thing. They're not mutually exclusive, but they do share a lot of data. However, there are attributes about these items, if you will, that are necessary to manage them as assets from a cost, financial, audit perspective, location, inventory control. And then there's attributes about them that are needed to manage the services. Things like, the configuration of the items, things like CPU size and processor and memory, and their critical relationships that they have with other assets, and those are used to manage services. So the attributes are not the same, even though the devices might be the same. The challenge we typically have is that they're in two separate databases, which is not necessarily an issue. But how do we ensure that the data is being federated, integrated, and shared, and how do we ensure that the goals and objectives of both, even though they have different focus, are aligned in supporting the goals and objectives of the organization? And I know that probably doesn't answer the question, but that's a very long and very interesting discussion and topic to get into. And I invite you to check out the course because, again, that's one of the key focus areas. So thank you for that question. Are there any other questions right now? Okay, it looks like there are not. So again, you can always reach out to me. My personal contact is there, my email, and you can always reach out directly to us at Pink Elephant via the website that's listed there. But again, I want to thank you for the time today. I hope you found that this was interesting. I hope it piqued your interest in this approach to asset management. But more importantly, I wish for you a great rest of your Friday and a great weekend. Thank you, and hopefully we'll talk again later.